Hello there, very good morning and welcome to Recount Watch for today, the 31st day of the National Recount exercise. I'm joined this morning by Brigadier Mark Phillips, the Prime Minister-elect. Brigadier, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ed, and good morning, people of Guyana who are watching this program.
Brigadier, we are almost to the finish line. Just about 240 odd boxes remaining to be counted before the recount exercise is complete, and already the writing is on the wall. We all know the results of the March 2nd elections. What is happening now is basically a reaffirmation of those results. You would have been at the conference center yesterday to have a look at what was happening there in terms of the recount process. If you can quickly, just in maybe in a minute or two, give us an idea of how things are going at that end.
Well, I can tell you that all the stakeholders, that is GCOM, and the representative from all the political parties that contested the elections on March 2nd, along with the CARICOM team and other international and local observer representatives, all stakeholders continue to work together to achieve what we set out to do, to recount all the votes from the 2,339 ballot boxes that were utilized for the national elections on March 2nd. So I remain proud of all the workers there, all the stakeholders, because they continue to focus on the task at hand so we can conclude this recount process. I say latest Sunday. Some say it may roll over to Monday, but definitely by Monday, we will see a conclusion of this recount process with the last box of the 2,339 ballot boxes being counted. And as you mentioned, as we get closer to that proverbial last box, that last ballot box, more and more the writing is on the wall that the PPPC position will be vindicated, and our position of being victorious is based solely on the statements of polls in our possession. And again, I'd like to reiterate, and for the purpose of information to all the people of Guyana, that the statements of polls in the PPPC's possession are statements of polls that we got from GCOM. Bear in mind, to date, GCOM has not disclosed their statement of polls. And if you recall, only yesterday in a statement from the Organization of American States, they mentioned that they signed an agreement with GCOM as an observer, as an international observer. They signed an agreement with GCOM on the 26th of February. And that agreement, among other things, entailed GCOM handing over to them the statements of polls like they would have done for the PPPC. And now that we have a recount, the statements of recount. And the OS in the report is making it clear that to date, they have not received any statement of polls from the GCOM. So we are on the road to victory. We are not triumphant. We are not being euphoric here. What we are interested in as a political organization, a responsible political organization in Guyana, what we are interested in here is the respect for the whole process, right? And to ensure that the will of the people are respected throughout this recount process.
Brigadier, the past month or so has not been without its own troubles and challenges with regards to the recount exercise, primarily as a result of frivolous, baseless allegations by the coalition, bearing in mind this is the very political movement that claimed victory after the elections on more than one occasions. bearing in mind this is the same political movement from its leadership that has that has repeated rather countless times that the activities of March 2nd, 2020 were free, fair, and credible. However, the entire recount process has been dominated by allegations of irregularities, voter fraud, inclusive of claims that persons who were not in the country voted and persons who were dead voted. All those allegations, the APA and UFC failed miserably at providing a shred of evidence to support those allegations. And we saw lists being presented to GCOM and GCOM sending lists to the Commissioner of Police. We know of the 172 names that the Immigration Department said those persons were out of the country. We continue to see those persons come forward to dispute the claims by the Immigration Department. If one is to look at the media today, you're going to see over 24 of those persons have already discredited the information that was provided by the Immigration Department.
Well, the issue at hand here indeed is that we've seen a change in narrative from the coalition. One time they won the elections, and as you said, another time the whole process is riddled with, fraudulent acts, But as I said yesterday in a press interview, what the coalition needs to do is to compile, collate all these alleged fraudulent acts by GCOM and be ready to place them before the courts. This is not the place, this is not the time for GCOM to be dealing with investigating frivolous allegations of fraudulent acts by the coalition. They're changing the narrative for one reason only. The writing is on the wall. Every day, with every box that is counted from now until the end, it will become clearer and clearer. The picture will become clearer and clearer that the coalition has lost these elections. So it's obvious that the coalition is changing the narratives, right, to suit the situation at hand. And they're at the stage now where they're desperate. And the narrative includes acts of desperation. And one can only recall the statements, the outlandish statements made to the control media yesterday by none other than the chairman of the APN, AFC and campaign manager, Mr. Joseph Harmon, Lieutenant Colonel retired Joseph Harmon. And he yesterday made more than frivolous allegations about this whole process. He went so far as to issue an ultimatum to GCOM. And if you can recall, today is the deadline for the ultimatum. And he's on record as saying, if GCOM don't answer to the ultimatums placed before it, they're going to march on to no other than the GCOM headquarters. And GCOM has moved their headquarters to the Ada Chung Conference Center. So I don't know if he's going to storm the conference center with an entourage from his coalition. I'm waiting to see what will happen. But more than that, it is very serious that here we have a political organization that participated in the electoral process, that signed on and committed themselves to respect the electoral process, is now issuing an ultimatum to GCOM, which is an independent body that answers to no political directorate in Guyana, that answers to no one but to themselves. An independent organization. And in the process, the same APNU, AFC, through their callous behavior and disrespect for the rule of law, has included the police force in this whole process by sending they request for an investigation to GCOM, who also acted wrongly, as far as I'm concerned. I can only criticize GCOM. They're an independent body. I respect them, but I can only criticize and say they acted wrongly by sending the list to the Commissioner of Police, who had insult to injury by starting an investigation. And bear in mind, the Guyana Police Force is another independent body in this country that answers to no political directorate, that does not answer to any political party. So we're seeing again a second independent body. Instead of upholding the independence and upholding the rule of law in Guyana, and perhaps the Commissioner of Police should listen to his legal advisors before taking these actions of trying to investigate, and prepare a report on a list, a report that from the time it was published and handed over to GCOM, it was flawed, because as you mentioned, as of yesterday and in today's paper, 24 persons listed on his report have so far come forward refuting the contents of the report by stating clearly that they were in Guyana, they continue to be in Guyana, and they voted in the elections as is expected of any Guyanese who in Guyana, exercising the right to vote or not to vote. So here again, we have another organization, the Guyana Police Force. And then in Mr. Harmon's report, if you recall, he's also bringing or attempting to bring into disrepute the work of a third independent body, the Office of the DPP, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The report with regards to an alleged confrontation, an alleged assault, by one of the commissioners, Mr. Robeson Ben, by one Dr. Imhoff, that those reports went to the DPP. The DPP did their investigation, and the DPP arrived at their decision. And here we have again Mr. Harmon trying to capture it yesterday in his press release, criticizing the work of the DPP. Now, these are all examples of acts of desperation. And I want to say that many Guyanese supported this coalition in 2015. Many Guyanese support this coalition again in 2020. And they're all looking on and listening. And I know many of them are disappointed in the actions of their leadership, specifically Mr. Harmon in this case with his ultimatum and his outlandish allegations and criticisms against these constitutional bodies. This is not the time for that. This is the time with almost 90%, and by now more than 90% of the boxes will have been counted, and the writing is on the wall. This is the time for the APNU AFC coalition to work along with the other stakeholders and see this recount process to its conclusion. And the fact that the writing is on the wall, be prepared to be statesman-like in their actions from now on. Be prepared to accept the results of the recount, and most likely it looks like it's going to be defeat. Accept the declaration and concede, and let us all transition to the legitimate government that will be declared at the end of the process, and let us all come together post-recount, post-declaration, and after the transition of the government to start or restart the development process of Guyana. There's a role for the opposition, and there's a role for the APNU AFC as we move forward with a new government headed by Dr. Irfan Ali. There's a role for the APNU AFC as an opposition and as a viable participant in any discussions pertaining to constitutional reform, electoral reform, discussions of shared governance. That is what we need in Guyana now. for them to concede at the end of this process, because the writing's on the wall, and prepare for their role as a vibrant, viable opposition participant in the governance of Guyana as we move forward.
Brigadier Phillips, you spoke about these allegations of fraud and irregularities emanating from the coalition, and as the days go by, it seemed to be intensifying, where the objections, unfounded objections, seem to be increasing. However, one clear case of fraud where there is significant evidence to show that indeed fraud was committed, that is through the inflated numbers by the returning officer for Region 4, Claremont Mingo, which was reflected in his previous declarations. That is coming out as we get into the count of the boxes on the East Coast. I want to share with you a few instances where these were demonstrated. I think yesterday, the count at the end of yesterday was about 20 boxes where you had inflated numbers by Mr. Mingo, some of them going way beyond 100. I think the maximum for one of those boxes was 111. I want to share these boxes, not just with you, but with the public, for them to have an idea of the inflation of the numbers by Mr. Mingo. I'll go through a few before I ask you to comment. And this one here is box number 4592, which is from the Good for Acting Sparring Dam area, and the polling place was the Plaisance Secondary School. So in this box, and I'll just focus on the APNU numbers because the PPP and the other parties, their numbers remain the same. APNU, based on the statement of poll, received 188 votes. The statement of recount confirmed that 188. But Mr. Mingo declared 258, an increase of 70 votes. If I'm to go to another one here, this is the same area. This is box number 4593, where the statement of poll had APNU at 125. It was confirmed by the statement of recount, but Mr. Mingo declared 155, giving them another 30. I'll do probably 2 or 3 more boxes so that you have an idea of the scale of the rigging. This one here, St. Paul's Primary, this is Plaisance, where the statement of poll gave them 229, the statement of recount 230, but Mr. Mingo declared 299, giving them another 69 votes. So those are 3 boxes. What I'll try to do is to probably get my hands quickly on some of the other boxes where the numbers were much higher, and I'll share them. The fact of the matter is, based on calculations for just yesterday, those 20 boxes, the numbers were somewhere around 1,360 plus votes Mr. Mingo gave to the coalition in just 20 boxes on the East Coast. And based on what we understand is that as the recount of the boxes on the East Coast continues, you're going to find that the numbers are way higher in some instances where Mr. Mingo propped up the votes to give the coalition that 7,000 plus that he declared in his fraudulent declarations.
Well, there's also a trend that in strongholds that, as you mentioned, these are coalition strongholds where many people, or the majority of people in those areas, would have voted for the coalition. And you had small amounts of votes for the PPPC. So what you see there is just an inflation, right? But as you move to other areas where you probably had more people voting for the PPPC, you will find also not only inflation of the votes for the coalition, but him deflating or decreasing the votes for the PPPC. And I will bet that as we go further up the East Coast now, As we look at the East Coast areas, especially the areas where we have the PPPC strongholds, again, you're going to see him deflating, reducing the votes going for to the PPPC and increasing the votes going for the coalition. So while there's a variance here in the three examples that you give, is a smaller variance when you get to other areas, especially those areas of where they're considered PPPC strongholds, there's a wider margin between, because he would not only inflate the votes for the coalition, but he will also deflate or decrease the votes for the PPPC. And as I said before, this is the order of the day with every box remaining for this recount. And what we've seen up to yesterday, there's been the margin was 7,000, they're about 7,000. The day before, it might have been a bit higher. But as we go into the areas that are deemed PPP stronghold, you will see with the statement of recount, the margin between the final votes for the coalition and the final vote for the PPP is going to be wider, right? The PPPC is going to increase the gap just because of this man's mischief, this man's mathematics. And, you know, what is interesting also is that in all the allegations, we have not seen any list, any discussion, any requests for investigation of Mingo's mischief. Check the list prepared by the APNU AFC and submitted to GCOM with all the concerns and all these allegations. You know, we haven't seen any requests for them to pronounce, for GCOM to pronounce, to discuss Mr. Mingo. Yesterday, one of the boxes being counted, and the young lady there, I think from another party, one of the smaller parties, after they finished counting one of the boxes where it was evident that Mr. Mingo fiddled with the results, she'd asked for an inclusion in the observation report, the fact that the results on the statement of return is now different from the results what they had listed before. And it can only be so because of Mr. Mingo's misconduct. And they refused, the supervisor refused to even make an entry on the observation that, you know, that look, we're seeing these misgivings, and it only could point to the returning officer. So here again, we have a situation where the coalition is ready to give a number, to list a number of allegations, but they're skillfully, they're deliberately excluding from the list any entry, any discussion of Mr. Mingo's mischief. And if there's any credible evidence of fraud that must be investigated for this election, it is what Mr. Mingo did with regards to the changes in the figures for the Region 4 results. That is the only thing that needs investigating, and that needs to be taken. If the GCOM don't want to take Mr. Mingo, call in the police and let the police start investigation. That is one that the coalition should take before the courts in the form of a petition. Capture everything and go and petition the courts. But don't exclude Mingo, include Mingo in your list.
Brigadier, you talked about the desperation earlier, but I want to take you back a little to severe, because of the fact that we have seen, like you might rightly mention, the changing narratives from the AP and UPAFC. They had started off saying that they won the elections. Then when the recount started, they said that the there were flaws, there were irregularities, there was electoral fraud. Now, when the boxes for Georgetown being tabulated and the gap narrows from 18,000 to 13,000, now down to 7,000 between the PPP and the APNU AFC. And we all know that when they get into the boxes for the East Coast and the tabulation is done, then you will see that gap widening again and go back somewhere about 15,000 when you get down to the end. But I saw the APNU now saying that they're using that, and this is how they're misleading their supporters, or they're trying to give their supporters something to hang on to. They're now saying that as the count goes on with Region 4, the gap will narrow, and eventually the APNU AFC will overtake the PPP when the recount is completed. So there seems to be, they haven't really decided which lie to tell, or what to do. Because one time you're saying that you won, then you're saying that the elections were rigged in the favor of the PPP. That is why the PPP numbers are showing like that. And now you're saying that, oh, you're going to overtake the PPP and win the elections again. Isn't this, in your view, something dangerous that they're selling to their supporters by not being honest with them?
Look, Ed, I think by now the supporters, the average supporter of the APNU AFC knows fully well that their leaders, their political leaders in the management of this post-March the 2nd activities, by now, if they were confused at the beginning, by now I think they've resigned to the fact that they're being lied to. And the average observer of elections in Guyana, with some knowledge of the demographics as to where people tend to vote more for a particular political party, will easily come to the conclusion that as you go along the East Coast, many of the villages still to be counted are deemed PPPC strongholds. And for every PPPC stronghold that you count, there's likely to be an increase in the votes for the PPPC. So I don't know who they're fooling. And I know many of their stakeholders have already started distancing themselves from this changing narrative that is being put out by the coalition every day, and more or less trying to do their own analysis, trying to observe the daily reports and arrive at their own conclusion. So here again, we have a coalition changing the narratives, but with every change of the narrative, I want to posit that they're experiencing a depleted support base that is buying into that narrative. Some people traditionally remain supporters, yes, but in terms of buying into the narrative, less and less of their supporters are buying into the narrative. More and more of their supporters are seeing the writing on the wall and is resigned to accepting the fact that the APNU AFC has lost these elections, and they didn't lose it with the recount. They have lost these elections since the close of poll on March the 2nd. Unfortunately, it took over 90 days for us to reach this point, and a few more days to go before everything is compiled and all the, the clerical work is completed and the declarations be made. And I admire the Guyanese people for their patience. I admire the supporters of especially the PPPC, for the calm and the resolute manner in which they continue to listen to us and to dispel and ignore the narrative and the changing positions coming out from the APNU AFC. And also I admire many of the supporters from the APNU AFC who are now doing their own analysis, right? Who are now reaching to the conclusion, arriving at the conclusion that they're being lied to by their political leaders. And that itself will be helpful as we move forward for a peaceful transition at the end of this process. If all your supporters on both sides accept what is to be declared, there can only be one leader, is the better for all of us moving forward. The issue at hand right now remains with that small group, or that cabal as you call it, in the leadership of the coalition, who still feel that they can hang on, they can change the narrative, they can change the inevitable. But that is delusional. They've lost these elections.
Brigadier Phillips, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning to update the nation on the recount process and where we are at the moment. Of course, we're going to be back here at 1 p.m. with another update, joined with Harris, who will bring you that. Brigadier Mark Phillips, Prime Minister-elect, again, thank you very much for being here. And to our viewers, we want to say thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, our viewers. Bye-bye.